Eric Martin, Lewis Clark State College, and today I'm going to give a little intro to setting up the materials for this week, which focuses on Chapter 26 in Worlds of History, the Cold War and the Third World. We're looking specifically at Vietnam, Cuba, Argentina, Afghanistan. Time frame is 1945, after World War II, up until 1989. The main mission that I want you to do for the week is to answer this question: what is the Cold War? And we're looking at it from various perspectives. The Cold War, I think, is one of those events in history, like many events, but it really is one of those events in history that matters of perception are a big deal. So we've got several different angles on this issue. What is the Cold War? I strongly suggest you read up on it in your in the grand text, right, in the big text. But that's our mission. Now, the Bridging World History Unit 23, that focuses in on the revolution and the resistance in China, in Iran, and in Argentina. So take a look at that. You'll get a sense about what's going on during the time period. But I've also included a number of additional videos for this week, and in particular, that A&E biography on Ho Chi Minh. Now, it's going to mean a little extra time watching videos this week. Not that much extra, but a little extra. But the interesting thing, or several interesting things, about Ho Chi Minh is that Ho Chi Minh gives us an opportunity to look at the colonial period, World War I, the interwar years between World War I, World War II, the nationalist struggle in Vietnam, and the Cold War, all through one individual. So he lives for a very long time, and there's a number of global strands that intersect his life. So I want you to watch that A&E biography. I think it'll give you not only some background information for a major figure of the 20th century, but I think it'll also give you a fast crash course on the 20th century, or at least about the first 2/3 of it anyway. When you watch the video, pay special attention to issues of what are the key events in his life, what helps him decide what to believe, right? And then, what does he believe? What is he trying to accomplish? That seems like an important question for dealing with issues of the Cold War. And then, after you watch that, there are a number of other videos that go along with the sources. And so as I talk about the sources, I'll bring up those particular videos. So in terms of the sources this week, we have this first source by Hoynik Kwan, Origins of the Cold War. That's a true historiographical piece, in the sense that he's comparing different historical interpretations of the Cold War. And he's making this argument, right, that depending on when you say the Cold War begins, kind of depends on who you pin the responsibility for generating it. So he uses Korea as the example, but it's a bigger example. So that's a really great one to just kind of get us started on different ideas about the Cold War. Well, what is the Cold War? Well, in part it depends on where you decide it begins, and then maybe when it ends. The next document, all the rest of the documents are primary sources in one shape or another. The next one is the Vietnamese Declaration of Independence, and the document after that is linked to it. It's a report on CIA operations in Vietnam. and these go together really well with the A&E biography on Ho Chi Minh. So take a good look at the Vietnamese Declaration of Independence and get a sense about what at least that Declaration of Independence is saying and who it's saying it to. You know, it's a Vietnamese audience, but why would Ho Chi Minh model it that way? And then this other issue with Lansdale's report on CIA operations in Vietnam. All right, take a look at that. What is the CIA doing in Vietnam? And what does that have to do with the Cold War, other than, well, the CIA is in Vietnam? I mean, it seems like the CIA activity in Vietnam and the kind of activity they're engaged in might give you some sense about, the flavor of the Cold War. We'll come back to the CIA in a minute. The next three documents specifically focus on Nikita Khrushchev and his "we will bury you" statement. And so there is a video link. It's not a very long video. Just gives you an idea about, what Khrushchev looked like, what his behaviors were. He's a real, animated figure. And there is a report of the same story from three different sources. One of them is from Time Magazine, one of them is from the New York Times, and the other one is kind of from Pravda, which is the official Soviet newspaper. It's actually the New York Times telling the story of what was in Pravda. But the point is, on these three stories, the story's not told exactly the same. What's left out? What's added in? Do you think there is a reason for one way of telling the story in one source or not? And then after reading the sources, what's it tell you about the whole thing? I mean, this is sort of the mission, right? Here we have an incident that happened. We got three different sources. They tell the story three different ways. So now we, as a data analysis, are trying to figure out what happened. We continue looking at the Soviet connection with the Soviet telegram on Cuba, but we also move in to Latin America and getting an idea about what's going on with Soviet-Cuban relations during the Cuban Missile Crisis. So this particular document is from the Soviet embassy in Cuba, going back to Moscow, letting folks in Moscow know what's going on. Read it carefully. Kind of what do they see is going on? What's their perception of the Cold War from their end? And then the video link that I have for you on this one is President Kennedy's address to the nation about the about what he had discovered in the Cuban Missile Crisis. So you can just kind of get a sense of what does he think it is, or at least what is he projecting to the American people. This is what's happening. And are there discrepancies between that and the Soviet peace? And if so, how do you account for them? Then we have this piece, these telephone transcripts looking at the coup in Argentina. Now, the Bridging World History video covered that. And then I also linked up a very short video. It's a news video where the whole period of the Dirty War was revisited recently. So take a look at those two videos, get a sense about what the Dirty War is, and then read into this this transcript in this telegram. And so the question becomes, in some ways, what's the U.S. involvement? Is there U.S. involvement? And if so, how? Or why is the telegram occurring in the first place? What's being discussed? Okay, And then finally, we go to a whole new set of telegrams, right? The telegrams transcript, telephone transcript, between the Soviet premier and the Afghan prime minister. So this is looking at the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, and so frequently the historical comparison of the Soviet involvement in Afghanistan is referred to it as the Soviets' Vietnam, right? That's usually the way that it's compared. So take a look at that. What's it look like is happening as far as the Soviets are concerned? And then I put that video link to the Jihad with U.S. Arms, the Soviet-Afghan War, to give you a fast breakdown of what was actually going on with that. That seemed important to understand the context for that. It's not the best context, but it's pretty good context. And if you don't know anything about it, it's a good way to start. So anyway, that covers the materials for the week. On the one hand, it seems like maybe there's a little more than usual in terms of the videos that I'm asking you to use. And at the same time, well, now we're getting into a time period in which there are lots of videos to use. And you can kind of get a look for yourself at what these people look like. And it seems like we ought to use that stuff to kind of bring some of these sources to life. So, what was the Cold War? Using these documents. Break it down document by document. Talk about it in a big pile. But whatever you do, get into historical detail. If you need me for anything, call me on the phone, email, drop that by my office, and enjoy your historical studies. And I'll see you next time.